She warned me, this could cost my career. I looked at her, the woman who taught me everything about strength, and whispered, and it could win my heart. The office was supposed to be silent at this hour. Most desks were abandoned, monitors dark, the faint hum of the air conditioning filling the empty corridors. I glanced at the clock on my screen, 8:57 p.m. It had been a long day, and yet, there she was, Ms. Hartley, standing near the window of her office, shoulders squared against the faint glow of the city lights below. Her presence had a gravity to it, the kind that made you straighten your back without meaning to. She was 42, composed, intelligent, the kind of woman whose voice could command a room yet never needed to rise. Tonight, though, she looked human. A strand of dark hair had slipped from its place, brushing the side of her cheek as she scanned the stack of reports on her desk. "Still here?" I asked, leaning against her doorway. She looked up, a flicker of surprise softening into a weary smile. "Deadlines don't care about the clock," she said, a touch of humor hiding the weight behind her words. "I could stay," I offered. "Help you finish it." For a moment, she hesitated, not because the help wasn't needed, but because it was me. There was an unwritten rule in offices like ours: professionalism first, appearances second, and everything else a distant third. She studied me with the quiet caution of someone who had spent years walking that tightrope. "You should go home, Daniel. It's late." "So is this project," I replied lightly, taking a step in. "Besides, I make a decent coffee." That earned a real smile. Small, quick, but it lingered just long enough. "Fine," she said at last, sliding a folder toward me. "If you're going to insist on staying, you can proof this section." I took the folder, and as I did, her fingers brushed mine, warm, deliberate yet fleeting. It shouldn't have meant anything, but the contact stayed with me, a quiet echo in the otherwise still room. The next hour passed in the quiet companionship of work. The soft clatter of keys, the shuffle of papers, the low murmur of her voice when she asked for a second opinion. Every now and then, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that stayed in the air like a whisper. When I glanced up, she was looking at me, elbows on the desk, chin resting on her hand. Her eyes, usually sharp and assessing, held something gentler tonight. "You're good at this," she said softly. I shrugged. "You make it easy to want to do well." There was a pause, not uncomfortable, just long enough for the weight of the moment to settle between us. The city glowed behind her, the office lights casting soft edges on her face. In that quiet, something unspoken shifted. Either of us named it. Not yet. The office had long surrendered to the night. From the glass wall of the lounge, the city pulsed below, neon threads of headlights weaving through the streets, distant enough to seem unreal. The clock read 10:12 p.m. Most lights were off except for the soft amber glow over the lounge table where Ms. Hartley sat, a pair of half-empty takeout boxes between us. "I can't believe we're eating cold noodles out of paper cartons," she said, a faint laugh escaping her lips as she poked at the food with her chopsticks. "It's gourmet when it's after hours," I said, leaning back in the chair. "Everything tastes better when you're too tired to care." She chuckled, and the sound, rare and unguarded, warmed the quiet room. Her hair was tied loosely now, a few strands framing her face in a way I hadn't seen during the day. For the first time, she didn't look like the woman who led the morning meetings with a voice that filled the entire floor. She looked real. "I used to think I'd have this figured out by now," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "Work-life balance. The mythical equation." I glanced at her. "And? Have you solved it?" Her lips pressed into a faint smile. "Not even close. I spend my days building a company that never sleeps, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what a quiet evening felt like." The hum of the vending machine filled the pause that followed. I didn't rush to fill it. Sometimes silence carried more weight than any advice. "You know," I said gently, "you don't always have to hold the world together on your own." She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes searched my face, as if trying to measure the sincerity behind my words. It's not that simple, she replied. Responsibility doesn't come with an off switch. I nodded. Maybe not. But moments like this, they remind you it's still okay to breathe. For a moment, the conversation drifted. Work turned to music, music turned to travel, and travel turned to the places we hadn't seen yet. Her stories carried a kind of weight, memories of cities visited in brief, hurried stays, plans postponed for meetings that couldn't wait. When she reached for the tea mug beside me, her fingers brushed against my sleeve, a feather-light contact, so small it might have been accidental. But she didn't pull away right away. Neither did I. The city lights reflected softly in her eyes, and in that quiet corner of the office, it felt like the rest of the world had fallen asleep. Thank you, she said finally, setting the mug down. For what? For staying. For not making it complicated. I smiled faintly. Sometimes, the simplest things mean the most. She exhaled, a slow, tired breath, and for a brief second, her shoulder leaned ever so slightly toward mine. It wasn't a decision. It was just gravity. The office felt different that afternoon, not in its appearance, but in the way people moved through it. Whispers traveled faster than emails. Heads leaned closer in quiet conversation. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew enough to guess: 2 late nights, 1 shared dinner, and a company that fed on speculation. By 3 o'clock, a message arrived. Can you come to my office? I knocked lightly before stepping in. Ms. Hartley was standing behind her desk, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the skyline rather than me. Papers were neatly stacked, but her pen lay untouched, spinning idly between her fingers. Close the door, she said, her voice calm but lacking its usual ease. I did as she asked and waited. She turned at last, and for a moment, the woman who looked at me wasn't just my boss, she was someone calculating the weight of a decision. There's been talk, she said quietly. About you and me staying late. About the dinners. I didn't answer right away. The hum of the city beyond the glass seemed louder than usual. And? I asked finally. Her eyes met mine, steady but carrying something almost like regret. You know how this works, Daniel. I've spent years building a reputation in this company, being careful, being above reproach. I can't have that question now, not for... She stopped herself. Not for what? For me? For the unspoken warmth that had begun to thread itself between us? I understand, I said quietly. You're protecting what you've built. She exhaled, and for the briefest second, her shoulders softened. It's not just about me. It's about you, too. People will talk. They already are. I nodded. So what do you want me to do? There was a pause, one that lasted longer than it should have. Her hand tightened slightly around the pen before she set it down. Just be careful. Keep a little distance. At least for now. I wanted to tell her that distance wouldn't stop the thoughts, the glances, the way her voice lingered in my mind when I left the building at night. But I didn't. Instead, I said, if that's what you need, I'll respect it. Something flickered across her face then, a hint of relief, maybe mixed with something she couldn't name. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass door, her eyes still on me, not with coldness, but with the kind of look that held everything back because it had to. The hallway outside felt colder. Colleagues walked past, none of them knowing what had been said behind that door. To them, it was just another meeting. To me, it was a line drawn, thin, fragile, but very real. And yet, beneath all that restraint, the memory of her voice from the night before lingered, warm, tired, human. The rain had started while we were still inside the restaurant, a fine mist at first, then a steady curtain that blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and red. The corporate dinner had been long, full of handshakes and polite laughter, but by the time we stepped outside, the night felt different, quieter, softened by rain. She stood beneath the awning, scanning the street for a taxi, her coat collar turned up. Even in the dim glow of the street lamp, she carried herself with the same quiet authority she always did, but there was a weariness there too, the kind that didn't come from one night, but from many. Let me call one, I offered, phone already in hand. She glanced at me, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Always prepared, aren't you? Someone has to be, I said. The cab pulled up, tires hissing against the wet pavement. I held the door open, and as she stepped in, I reached out instinctively, a light touch at her elbow to steady her. Her sleeve was damp and cool beneath my fingers, but the warmth of her arm underneath was unmistakable. Inside, the cab was a cocoon of dim yellow light and the soft percussion of rain on glass. She sat with her hands clasped in her lap, gaze turned to the blurred city outside. For a moment neither of us spoke. Long night, I said finally. She let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. Long year, she corrected. Something in her voice carried more weight than the words themselves. Not just fatigue, something deeper, more personal. You carry a lot, I said gently. Her eyes shifted toward me, searching. It comes with the job. That's not what I meant. She didn't answer right away. Her reflection in the rain-streaked window looked almost like a different version of her, softer, quieter, less guarded. I'm tired of always having to be strong, she admitted at last, voice barely above the hum of the engine. Everyone sees the title, the decisions. No one asks how it feels to be the one making them. I didn't try to fill the silence that followed. Instead, I let it stretch, not awkwardly, but gently, like an open space where the truth could settle. I think, I said finally, strength doesn't mean not feeling the weight. It just means you carry it anyway. Her lips parted slightly, as if to respond, but no words came. Our knees brushed as the cab turned a corner, and neither of us moved away. Outside, the rain blurred the world into a watercolor of lights. Inside, the air felt still, fragile, almost suspended. She sighed, leaning back against the seat. You have a way of making things sound simpler than they are. Maybe they are simpler, I said, my voice low, when you don't have to carry them alone. She didn't answer, but her hand, resting on her knee, shifted just slightly, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from it. The office was nearly empty again, a faint echo of our first late night together. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows, a softer rhythm than the stormy downpour of that night in the cab. Only one desk lamp glowed in her office, casting a warm halo over scattered papers and an untouched cup of coffee. I stood at the doorway, folder in hand. Everyone else already left, I said quietly. Ms. Hartley looked up from her notes, eyes tired but calm. Deadlines don't wait for sleep, she murmured, echoing her words from weeks before. I stepped inside and set the folder down. Then I guess I'll keep you company. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but not disapproval either. You don't have to, Daniel. Not tonight. I know, I said, pulling a chair closer to her desk. I want to. For a while, we worked in that familiar rhythm, the muted scratch of pens, the low rustle of paper, the rain soft against the glass. But tonight something was different, not in what we were doing, but in what we weren't saying. Every glance felt a fraction too long. Every pause in conversation carried a weight that hadn't been there before. She reached for her mug, fingers brushing the rim in idle circles, then set it back down without drinking. Finally I spoke, not to break the silence, but because holding it in had started to feel dishonest. I look forward to these evenings more than I probably should. Her hand stilled on the mug. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to mine. There was no anger there, no sharpness, only stillness, like the moment before rain truly starts to fall. Daniel! Her voice was soft, warning and wondering all at once. I know what people are saying, I continued quietly. I know the risks, for you, for me. But I also know how I feel when I'm here with you. It's different. It's real. She looked away, out toward the rain-slicked skyline. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the mug, a small motion that said more than words. This could cost my career, she whispered. I nodded slowly. And if it's not worth the risk, I'll respect that. I just couldn't keep pretending this is only work anymore. Silence stretched between us, long enough for the city lights to shift from gold to a deeper amber. When she finally turned back, there was something in her expression that hadn't been there before, a trace of softness, and something almost like fear. Not of me, but of what this might mean if she let it in. "I don't know what the right answer is," she admitted. "Maybe there isn't one," I said. "Maybe we just start with honesty." For a brief moment, her hand lifted, just slightly, as if reaching for something unseen, before settling on the desk between us. Her fingertips brushed mine, not by accident this time, but as if to say, "I hear you." The rain kept falling. Neither of us moved away. It wasn't planned. It never is, in moments that matter most. I had ducked into the small bookstore cafe on the corner of Maple and Fifth, craving a quiet hour with a worn paperback and a cup of something warm. The bell above the door chimed, and when I looked up from the shelves, there she was. Miss Hartley, though outside these walls, the title felt heavy and almost out of place. Her scarf was wrapped loosely around her neck, her hair slightly tousled from the late autumn breeze. She looked more like a woman out enjoying a quiet Saturday morning than the composed leader who stood at the head of conference tables. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Daniel?" I smiled, lowering the book in my hands. "Seems the city isn't as big as we thought." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Or we're just both creatures of habit." We found ourselves sharing a table by the window, 2 cups steaming between us. The bookstore was alive with the soft murmur of turning pages and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. For once, there was no spreadsheet between us, no ticking clock of deadlines, just 2 people with an unexpected stretch of time. "What do you read when it's not reports?" she asked, nodding toward the book I'd brought. "Mostly travel stories," I said. "Places I want to see one day. People I want to meet." She traced the rim of her cup with one fingertip, thoughtful. "I used to do that. Make lists of places I'd go when the timing was right. Somehow, the timing never came." Her voice held no bitterness, only a quiet truth. I tilted my head slightly. "You still could, you know." She smiled, but her eyes didn't quite follow. "Maybe. I'm starting to realize I've been waiting for life to slow down on its own, and it never does." Outside, a breeze rattled the windowpane. She adjusted her scarf, and without thinking, I reached over and fixed the loose fold where it had slipped from her shoulder. My fingers brushed the soft fabric, and beneath it, the warmer softness of her skin. She looked at me then, really looked, and the moment stretched, delicate as glass. "I don't usually do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Let people see me outside of the version they know. The one that doesn't falter." "I like this version," I said, and meant it. Her breath caught just slightly. Then, almost as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she leaned in as we stood to leave and wrapped her arms around me, a soft, unhurried hug that carried no demand, only recognition. Her cheek rested just below my jawline. I could feel the faint warmth of her breath. When she stepped back, her hand lingered for a moment at my sleeve. "See you Monday?" she said, a small smile flickering. "See you Monday," I echoed, though something in me hoped it wouldn't only be Monday. The week passed in measured steps, meetings, emails, the everyday rhythm of work, but something had shifted. Our conversations no longer carried that edge of unspoken resistance. The air between us wasn't as fragile, though it was still deliberate, cautious. It was late again, just past sunset, the office tinted with streaks of orange fading into gray. Most of the floor was empty, save for the soft murmur of a printer somewhere down the hall. Ms. Hartley's office door was half closed when I knocked gently. "Come in," she said. She was standing by the window, city lights beginning to flicker awake behind her. The desk lamp cast a golden outline along her profile. There were no stacks of papers this time, no hurried deadlines. Only a quiet stillness that made the moment feel heavier than any of the ones before. "I've been thinking," she began, turning to face me. "About everything." I stayed silent, letting her find her own pace. "About how easy it is to keep pushing life aside in the name of being careful," she continued, her voice steady but softer than I'd ever heard it. "I've built my career on caution. And yet, somewhere between all those late nights, I started looking forward to the sound of your knock on my door." Her admission wasn't loud, but it filled the room. "I'm not asking for anything reckless," I said quietly. "I'm just asking for honest." She stepped closer, her heels barely making a sound against the polished floor. For a moment, her hand hovered above the edge of the desk, as though the decision rested right there, waiting to be picked up. "Do you know what this could mean for me?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And I'm not here to take anything from you, only to give this a chance, whatever it becomes." The city outside blurred into a wash of headlights. She reached out then, her hand finding mine on the desk. Warm. Certain, though her fingers trembled just slightly. For the first time, either of us looked away. "There's no guidebook for this," she whispered. "Good," I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "We'll write our own." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full, alive with the weight of everything that had led us here. Slowly she stepped in, close enough that I could see the faintest trace of tiredness around her eyes, the warmth of something braver beneath it. I didn't kiss her. Either of us rushed that moment. Instead, our foreheads met gently, a quiet, grounding touch that carried more meaning than any declaration could have. The city hummed on outside, unaware of what had just shifted in that small office. When we finally stepped back, her hand still rested in mine. "We'll take it slow," she said. "Slow works," I replied. "As long as it's real." And for the first time in weeks she smiled, not the kind she wore for the world, but the kind meant only for one person standing in front of her.